So we'll offer now some practical alarm clocks, fourth way style alarm clocks, exercises to help us struggle with identification and promote more light into our cosmology and psychology. So, all right. So I guess it's important to create exercises for each center, each function. Yeah, intellectual center, emotional center, instinctive center, moving center, sex center, because each one of these centers they are stimulus response mechanism, and something happens internally or externally, and they generate impulses. They are shooting bubbles, these bubbles of me, bubbles of eyes, and then in a usual state of waking sleep, we identify each one of them. So I guess let's take it one by one. In the intellectual center, yeah, the tendency to what happens in a lower state of consciousness, the intellectual center basically is full of thoughts, images, memories, voices, past, future, worries, desires, and consciousness is dormant, kind of hypnotized by it. Yeah. So any work with catching identification, basically catching yourself in this daydreaming that is unnecessary. Yeah, the unnecessary mind activity, unnecessary uncontrolled mind activity. Whenever you catch yourself and then realize that I've been taken as a taxi into no man's land, and just realize that and return, coming back to sensing, feeling the body, sensing the sense of one's own presence. This is very good exercise ongoingly, you know. But this is a little bit too big. It's too, you know, because it's pervasive, happens all the time. Yeah. So I guess some of my favorite ones would be, as we mentioned before, to put aside some time, like 10 minutes, when I'm engaged in some kinetic activity, in something where I don't need to think, like walking or driving the bicycle or running or anything like that. Yeah, the body is doing it and the mind tends to be checked out. The exercise is 10 minutes on the clock to just really not allow oneself to continue these stories. So a thought comes, we notice, we don't stick to it. We don't embroider. The exercise is no embroidery, basically. That's the exercise. Another thought comes, we notice, we don't get involved with it. Stay aware of the light, the colors, the body. Yeah, another way to look at it is that which is listening, the listener to the thoughts, which is consciousness, is closed for business. Imagine like one of those cashier, it has a break. Yeah, it's like closed, and people come and they knock, they say, hey, yeah, it's like, no, the cashier is having a break, not engaging with thinking. Yeah, so this is good to do a few minutes. Yeah, in this way, what happens? You get more. You have more chances to discover experientially what Peter talked just before here. This to discover the space or that in which the thoughts arise and that in which the thoughts die. That whatever that is not a thought. In some tradition, they call it the yoga of the interval. To be aware enough to notice that nothing, the aware nothing, the aware silence, when a thought just died out and before one comes, that is the being. Yeah. So that's a good exercise, you know, with the intellectual center. For the emotional center, I mean, let's say for
Before
the.
you go to the
Go ahead.
emotional center, I'd like to add I can add a couple of things.
Yeah.
Another useful thing to try to do when speaking, because when we speak, whether it's coming from our instinctive center or our emotional center, it has to come through our intellectual center when we speak. And the thing that a useful thing to do is to slow down. A lot of times what happens, and you see this a lot now, is when we're identified, one center will try to do the work for another center. And what happens when we talk too fast, the moving center is now trying to do the work of the intellectual center. Or another way to say it is intruding upon the intellectual center. It's imposing its own energy on the intellectual center. The intellectual center is trying to operate with the energy of the moving center, which is a faster energy than the intellectual center. So to slow down when speaking. Another thing is when you forget what you wanted to say.
When you lost the eye.
When you lost the eye, you lost the thought, don't panic. Don't go chasing after it. Try to just exist in the gap there, in that emptiness. This would be a way to not identify. Don't be identified with having lost identity with the thought. Because that's what happens is we think it was me. I'm gone. I must now go back and catch me. No, it was just a thought. And to rest, so to say, comfortably, securely, knowingly in the silence of presence when that happens. And another thing related to that is if you find yourself confused in a moment, you can't, the intellectual center is always trying to solve some kind of problem, find the definition, find the answer, the solution. And you don't need to. And if you find yourself feeling confused, oh my gosh, I can't figure it out. So just again, do the same thing as with when you forget a thought. You can't remember a thought. Let yourself go into the space, the emptiness behind the confusion. Yeah. And it will clear itself up. The intellectual center tries to clear itself up itself, and that often doesn't work. It makes the confusion worse. Just sit back, so to speak, behind your intellectual center, behind the thoughts, and let it normalize, neutralize. And it will do that if we're not identified with it.
Yeah, to further continue with the same exercise that Peter talked about when we lost the thought, lost the eye, instead of freaking out, yeah, to just relax in that space. And, you know, very likely we may have some emotional stuff now. We may have some shame or so-called embarrassment, which is AKA inner considering. Yeah, we'll talk next time. So observe that and be comfortable with that little energy of so-called the shame. You're aware of it. Yeah. And, you know, especially now we are, you know, so you're presenting or you're some authority, you know, there's all this, and now I lost the thought. Another one, you know, the intellectual center, when there's not enough awareness in the system, it really likes to just label things and associate. So just this, coming back to the example of walking in the woods or walking through a street of Italy or somewhere, you know, notice how we are looking around and some aspect of the intellectual center will just label things. Oh, this is that, and this is like that, and just labeling reality. And the intellectual center has been trained like that due to wrong education, where we, you know, remember when we were little kids, or you see mothers that are proud of their kids and they want them to be intelligent little boys, and they say, oh yeah, this is yellow, and this is a brick, and this is a car. So, you know, the mother teaches them words, which is, we need to learn words, but somehow we are praised for that. Like we know the label, yeah? So I no longer see the oak tree. I no longer see the cloud. I no longer see anything. I just have these labels which are empty, you know? So try to walk around in nature or to walk around, to look at things without going into labeling, without going to the memory bank. See, just to see consciously without resorting to the memory bank labeling. And whenever the label come, notice, but don't go involved with it. Yeah. In this way, we start to relax the unnecessary use of the intellectual center. Also, like you can go to the Louvre, you can go to the Versailles or some great museum. You know, I've seen this. You can go through all these paintings, Mona Lisa, Botticelli, all these people. And instead of looking at it with presence and openness, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Botticelli and he was part of this school. And then, oh yeah, that's that one. So now basically the intellectual center is regurgitating all of these books, missing the whole, the actual frequency of beauty, you know? So watch out for that.
I think a similar thing that I mentioned about the intellectual center applies to the moving center. When we're more identified, we move faster. There's more frenzied movement. We're in a hurry. We try to do two things at once with the moving center. And so one way to not identify, be less identified in relation to the moving center is to slow down. Just do one thing at a time. Do what we're doing. If we feel hurried, to realize, you know, you can't get there before you get there. And also, this is interesting. If you're late for your plane and you have to run for the plane, it doesn't mean you have to be identified with the moving center. That's the right work of the moving center in that moment, is to run for the plane. Because if you get there in 30 seconds instead of 2 minutes, you might make it. That's good. But you can actually be in a hurry without being identified. There's a famous quote I like from a basketball coach, a famous basketball coach. And the saying was, and he would teach his players, be quick, but not in a hurry. Because when you're in a hurry, you make a mistake. But if you're quick and you're not in a hurry, you'll be very effective in playing the game of basketball in this instance. So that same thing, we can be quick and not in a hurry with the moving center.
That the basketball player, there's a Latin proverb, Peter, like festina lente, like hurry up slowly. Hurry up slowly.
I don't know that. Yes, interesting.
Okay, so let's stay here more. Practical exercises. These are good to work with it, you know, for a week. Then you drop it. Then you work with another one for a week or for a few days. Then you drop it. Some you really like a lot, you work for a few months, then you drop it, you know, so just to keep the work fresh, keep the work practical. In the module we are going to do together, me and Peter, focusing on this practically, we are going to have a whole basket with many such small aims, like hundreds of such small aims. And so we can, you know, one for 1 day, one for a week, one for a month. We can some of the exercises we can share together.